"Mom, if we give him our lunch, what will we eat tonight?" The question hung in the cold afternoon air like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Emily Parker looked down at her 8-year-old son, Noah, standing beside her on the crowded sidewalk of downtown Chicago. His small fingers tightened around the handle of his worn backpack. In his other hand was the brown paper bag that held their lunch. Their only lunch. For a moment, neither of them moved. The city rushed around them. Car horns echoed between glass buildings. A bus hissed as it pulled away from the curb. People hurried past with coffee cups, briefcases, and phones pressed against their ears. Nobody slowed down. Nobody looked twice. And nobody seemed to notice the man sitting alone on the metal bench near the corner. His coat was old and faded. His shoes were soaked from the melting snow that lined the sidewalks. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled the collar tighter around his neck. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a long day. The kind that comes from carrying too many difficult days in a row. Emily followed Noah's gaze toward the stranger. The man wasn't asking for money. He wasn't calling out to anyone. He simply sat there staring at the ground as thousands of people passed him by as though he had become invisible. Emily felt something tighten inside her chest. She knew that feeling. She knew what it was like when people looked through you instead of at you. She knew what it was like to wonder whether anyone cared. Noah looked up again. "Mom." Emily opened her wallet. One $10 bill. For singles. A few coins. That was everything. Payday was still 2 days away. Her electric bill sat unopened on the kitchen counter. Rent was due next week. The transmission in her aging Honda was making a sound she couldn't afford to investigate. Life had become a long series of calculations. Every dollar had a destination before it even arrived. Every decision carried a consequence. Yet somehow, standing there in the wind, staring at the stranger on the bench, none of those calculations seemed to matter. Emily knelt beside her son and brushed a strand of blonde hair from his forehead. "We'll figure something out," she said softly. Noah glanced toward the man again, then back to his mother. Children notice more than adults think. He understood what that answer meant. It meant there wasn't another plan. It meant she was choosing kindness anyway. Emily stood and walked toward a small deli across the street. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. 10 minutes later, she emerged carrying a warm turkey sandwich, a cup of soup, and a bottle of water. The steam rose into the cold air. Noah followed quietly beside her. Together they approached the bench. The man looked up as their shadows crossed his feet. His eyes revealed surprise before quickly returning to caution. "Sir," Emily said gently, extending the bag toward him. "You look like you could use some lunch." For a second, he didn't react. It was almost as if he couldn't believe someone was speaking to him. Then his eyes shifted to the food. Back to Emily. Then to Noah. "I couldn't possibly," he began. "Please." Emily interrupted with a small smile. "It's okay." The man accepted the bag carefully, as though it contained something fragile, something valuable. His fingers lingered on the warm paper. For the first time, a faint expression softened his face. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice was calm, educated, unexpectedly polished. "You have no idea how much this means." Emily nodded. Everybody needs a little help sometimes. The stranger looked at her for a long moment. Not the quick glance most people offered. A real look. The kind that seemed to see beyond appearances. Around them, the city continued moving at full speed. Nobody noticed. Nobody stopped. Yet something invisible had shifted. Something important. Noah stepped forward and handed over the bottle of water. "You might need this too," he said. The man's expression changed again. This time there was warmth behind it. Genuine warmth. He accepted the bottle and smiled at the boy. "Thank you, young man." Noah smiled back. The stranger looked between mother and son. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the gray sky. The afternoon light reflected off nearby skyscrapers. For a moment, the noise of the city seemed far away. Then the man spoke again. "The world doesn't see many people like you anymore." Emily laughed softly. "We're just trying to get through the week." But the stranger didn't laugh. Instead, he studied her with a thoughtful expression, almost as if he had just discovered something rare. Something he hadn't expected to find. And as Emily turned to leave with Noah at her side, neither of them noticed the way the man continued watching them disappear into the crowd. Nor did they know that the simple lunch they had given away would soon become the most important meal of their lives. The next morning arrived with gray clouds hanging low over Chicago. Emily Parker stood in her small kitchen staring at a stack of unopened envelopes while coffee brewed in an aging machine that sounded like it was fighting for survival. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking clock above the refrigerator. Bills covered one corner of the table. Electricity, rent, insurance. Numbers seemed to follow her everywhere these days. Numbers that never stopped growing. She rubbed her temples and exhaled slowly. Across the room, Noah sat eating a bowl of cereal while finishing a science worksheet before school. His pencil moved carefully across the page. He always worked hard. Too hard for a child his age, Emily sometimes thought. Life had forced him to grow up faster than she wanted. "Did you finish your project?" she asked. Noah nodded. "Almost. We have to talk about what we want to be when we grow up." Emily smiled. "And what did you pick?" "Engineer." The answer came immediately. No hesitation. Noah's eyes lit up the same way they always did whenever he talked about building things. Bridges. Airplanes. Machines. Dreams were easy for children. Paying for them was harder. Emily looked away before he could see the worry behind her smile. After dropping Noah off at school, she drove to the downtown office where she worked as an administrative assistant for a small logistics company. The building was plain. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The coffee in the break room always tasted burnt. Yet Emily was grateful for the job. Every paycheck mattered. Every hour counted. She spent the morning answering calls, organizing schedules, and handling paperwork. By noon, the memory of the stranger from the previous afternoon had nearly faded. Life had a way of pushing old moments aside to make room for new concerns. Then her phone vibrated. A message from Noah's school appeared on the screen. Emily's heart jumped before she even opened it. Parents learn that reflex. Every unexpected call feels important. She read the message quickly. It was harmless. A reminder about an upcoming field trip. She relaxed and laughed quietly at herself. Still, the brief panic reminded her how fragile everything felt. One surprise expense. One unexpected problem. One bad month. Sometimes it seemed like the difference between stability and disaster was only a few dollars. Later that afternoon, as sunlight struggled through the clouds outside, Emily noticed a black luxury sedan parked across the street. It looked strangely out of place among the delivery trucks and compact cars lining the block. She glanced at it once before returning to work. She had no reason to think about it again. But the vehicle remained there, motionless, waiting. Across town, inside one of the tallest buildings in Chicago, the same man who had sat alone on the park bench now stood before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Gone was the worn coat. Gone were the weathered shoes. He wore a tailored navy suit. A silver watch rested on his wrist. The office around him was larger than Emily's entire apartment. His name was Daniel Brooks, founder and chief executive officer of Brooks Global Holdings, a company worth billions, a company with offices on 3 continents, a company whose decisions moved markets and shaped industries. Yet none of those achievements occupied his mind at that moment. Instead, he found himself thinking about a mother and her son. He replayed the conversation from the previous day. The sandwich, the bottle of water, the boy's kindness, the mother's quiet dignity. Hundreds of people had passed him without stopping. Some had looked away intentionally. Others had pretended not to notice him at all. Emily had not. Daniel turned toward his executive assistant. "Did you find them?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she replied carefully. Emily Parker, 32 years old, single mother, 1 son. Noah Parker, 8 years old. Daniel listened silently. "She works for Lakeshore Logistics." His expression remained calm. "Anything else?" The assistant hesitated. "Financially, she appears to be struggling." Daniel looked out the window again. Far below, thousands of people moved through the city unaware of the conversations taking place above them. "Keep watching," he said quietly. "Do not contact her." "Not yet." The assistant nodded. "Of course." Daniel folded his hands behind his back. He had built an empire by understanding people, by observing what they did when nobody was watching, what they chose when there was nothing to gain. Emily Parker had made a choice that many others would not have made, and somehow, he could not stop thinking about it. Back at the office, Emily packed her things at the end of the workday and headed toward the parking lot. The cold wind greeted her immediately. She pulled her coat tighter and climbed into her car. The engine hesitated before finally starting. Another problem waiting to happen. Another expense she could not afford. She drove toward Noah's school. unaware that events already set in motion were moving quietly beneath the surface of her ordinary life. She thought tomorrow would look exactly like today. She thought her biggest challenge was making it to the next paycheck. She had no way of knowing that somewhere in the city, one of the most powerful men in America had just decided not to forget her. 3 days passed. Chicago settled into one of those gray stretches where the sky seemed permanently painted with clouds, and the wind found every gap in every coat. Emily Parker kept moving forward the only way she knew how. One day at a time. One bill at a time. One problem at a time. On Thursday morning, she woke before sunrise and sat at the kitchen table reviewing her monthly budget. The numbers refused to cooperate. She adjusted them once, then twice, then a third time. Nothing changed. There simply was not enough money. Noah shuffled into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks and carrying a science magazine he had borrowed from the school library. He dropped into the chair across from her and immediately began talking about a bridge design he had seen in the magazine. Emily listened carefully, smiling at the excitement in his voice. She always listened, even on the difficult days, especially on the difficult days, because Noah's dreams reminded her why she kept fighting. Later that morning, she arrived at Lakeshore Logistics and immediately sensed something felt different. Conversation stopped when she entered the office. People avoided eye contact. A few employees exchanged nervous glances. The atmosphere felt heavier than usual. Emily pushed the feeling aside and focused on her work. By 11 o'clock, an email appeared in her inbox requesting a meeting with human resources and senior management. Her stomach tightened. She stared at the screen for several seconds. People rarely got called into meetings like that for good news. The clock on her computer seemed louder than normal. Tick, tick, tick. Every second stretched longer than the last. When the time arrived, Emily walked down the hallway toward the conference room. The fluorescent lights above cast long reflections across the polished floor. Inside, 3 people waited. Human resources, her department manager, a company executive she had only spoken with twice in 3 years. Nobody smiled. Emily sat down slowly. The executive cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming, Emily." The words sounded rehearsed, carefully prepared. She already knew what was coming. Sometimes bad news announces itself before it arrives. The company was restructuring. Departments were being consolidated. Positions were being eliminated. None of it was personal. None of it reflected her performance. None of it changed the outcome. 10 minutes later, Emily walked out carrying a cardboard box containing family photos, a coffee mug, and a small frame drawing Noah had made when he was 6 years old. The office around her continued functioning normally. Phones rang. Printers hummed. Meetings continued. Yet her entire world had shifted. She stepped outside into the cold afternoon air and stood motionless beside her car. For a moment, she simply stared at the traffic moving through the city. 3 years of hard work. Gone. The wind tugged at her hair. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away before they could fall. She could cry later. Right now she needed a plan. She climbed into her Honda and drove toward Noah's school. The engine made the same worrying sound it had been making all week. Another reminder that problems never seem to arrive one at a time. When Noah climbed into the passenger seat that afternoon, he immediately noticed something was wrong. Children always know. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Emily forced a smile. "Just a long day." Noah studied her face. "You lost your job, did you not?" Emily glanced toward him. "How did you know?" He shrugged. "You only used that smile when you were trying not to worry me." For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Noah reached across the center console and squeezed her hand. It was such a small gesture, yet it nearly broke her heart. That evening, after dinner, Emily sat alone at the kitchen table while Noah worked on homework in his bedroom. The apartment felt unusually quiet. She opened her laptop and began searching for jobs. Application after application. Resume after resume. Hours passed. The glow of the screen reflected in tired eyes. Around 9 o'clock, she heard Noah's bedroom door open. He walked into the kitchen carrying a folded piece of paper. "What is that?" Emily asked. Noah placed it on the table. It was a list. At the top, he had written one sentence in careful handwriting. "Things we can do until everything gets better." Emily looked down. Cancel streaming services. Turn off lights more often. Eat at home. Skip birthday presents this year. Sell old toys. She covered her mouth as emotion surged through her chest. Noah pointed to the final item. "If needed, I can help too." Emily pulled him into a hug. Neither noticed the black luxury sedan parked quietly across the street. Inside sat a professional investigator hired by Daniel Brooks. He lowered a camera and made a brief note in a file already growing thicker by the day. Across the city, Daniel would receive that report before midnight. And when he read it, one particular sentence would hold his attention longer than all the others. Emily Parker had just lost her job. The timing, he realized, was about to change everything. The following week felt longer than the entire month before it. Every morning, Emily Parker woke before dawn, brewed the cheapest coffee she could find, and sat at the kitchen table searching for opportunities that seemed to disappear as quickly as they appeared. Applications filled her days. Rejections filled her inbox. Some companies never responded at all. Others sent polite messages thanking her for her interest before choosing someone else. The savings account she had spent years protecting began shrinking one withdrawal at a time. $20 here, $40 there. Small amounts that somehow felt enormous. Yet through it all, Emily refused to let Noah see her panic. She still packed his lunches. She still asked about school. She still smiled when he talked about engineering projects and science competitions. One afternoon, Noah came home carrying a flyer from school. His eyes were bright with excitement. "Mom, they picked me for the regional engineering workshop." Emily's face lit up instantly. "That is amazing." Then she saw the registration fee printed near the bottom of the page. Her smile froze for half a second before returning. Noah noticed. He always noticed. "It is okay if I cannot go," he said quietly. Emily folded the paper and handed it back. "Do not say that. You earned this." That night, after Noah had gone to bed, she sat alone staring at the registration form. The fee was not impossible, but right now, every dollar mattered. She looked around the apartment. The aging furniture, the worn carpet, the stack of unpaid bills near the lamp. Then she looked at Noah's drawing hanging on the refrigerator, a bridge stretching across a river, his name signed proudly in the corner. Emily closed her eyes. Somehow, she would find a way. Across the city, Daniel Brooks sat in a private conference room overlooking the Chicago River. Executives discussed acquisitions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Charts covered digital screens. Forecasts filled the air. Yet Daniel's attention drifted elsewhere. His assistant entered quietly and placed a folder beside him. "The latest report," she said. Daniel opened it after the meeting ended. Inside were updates on Emily and Noah, school records, employment history, financial information, notes from the investigator. Daniel turned pages slowly. The deeper he read, the quieter he became. Emily had never missed a rent payment until now. She had volunteered at Noah's school despite working full-time. She regularly donated canned food to local drives, even during years when money was tight. There were no headlines about her. No awards. No public recognition. Just a long history of small acts of kindness that nobody seemed to notice. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Most people reveal who they are when life becomes comfortable. Others reveal who they are when life becomes difficult. Emily belonged to the second group. Meanwhile, the investigator's final note caught his attention. Noah Parker selected for regional engineering workshop. Registration fee due in 4 days. Daniel stared at the sentence. Then he looked out the window toward the city skyline. Somewhere beyond those buildings, a mother was trying to protect her son's future while her own seemed increasingly uncertain. The next morning, Emily visited another interview. The company occupied a modern office building with glass walls and expensive artwork. She waited nearly 30 minutes before meeting the hiring manager. The conversation lasted less than 15. By the time she returned to her car, she already knew she had not gotten the job. The wind felt colder than usual. Her phone buzzed. It was her landlord. The voicemail was polite but direct. Rent was now overdue. Please call at your earliest convenience. Emily rested her forehead against the steering wheel. For the first time in years, uncertainty began outweighing hope. Yet when she arrived home that evening, she found Noah sitting at the kitchen table building a bridge from popsicle sticks and glue. He looked up and smiled. "I think this design can hold 20 pounds. Emily smiled back despite everything. "That is impressive." Noah nodded confidently. "Strong things can hold more weight than people expect." The words were innocent, simple, yet they lingered in Emily's mind long after he returned to his project. Because without realizing it, her son had just described her perfectly. And somewhere across Chicago, Daniel Brooks was beginning to prepare a decision that would soon place both of their lives on an entirely different path. Saturday arrived with freezing rain tapping softly against the apartment windows. Emily Parker sat at the kitchen table reviewing her bank balance for what felt like the 100th time that week. The number on the screen seemed unreal. Smaller than she had hoped. Larger than she had feared. Yet still not enough. Not enough for rent. Not enough for Noah's engineering workshop. Not enough to create the safety she desperately wanted for her son. The coffee beside her had gone cold nearly an hour earlier. She had not noticed. Her attention remained fixed on the growing list of responsibilities waiting for solutions. Across the room, Noah sat on the floor surrounded by notebooks, rulers, and scraps of cardboard. He was sketching ideas for a bridge design competition that might never happen if they could not pay the registration fee. Yet his focus never wavered. Children often believe in possibilities long after adults stop seeing them. Emily admired that about him. It was one of the reasons she fought so hard to protect his optimism. Around noon, she made a decision. She gathered several boxes from the hallway closet and began sorting through belongings. Old electronics, extra kitchen appliances, decorative items she no longer used. None of it held much value, but every dollar mattered now. Noah looked up from his project. "Are we having a garage sale?" Emily smiled gently. "Something like that." He nodded thoughtfully before disappearing into his room. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a remote control airplane he had received years earlier for Christmas. It was one of his favorite possessions. He placed it carefully into one of the boxes. Emily stared at it. "Noah, you do not have to do that." He shrugged. "If we are solving problems together, then I should help too." Emily felt emotion rise in her chest. Sometimes children demonstrate strength without realizing it. She pulled him into a hug and held him tightly. Later that afternoon, they loaded the boxes into the trunk of her car and drove to a local resale shop. The rain continued falling as gray clouds stretched across the city. By the time they returned home, they had earned less than $100. Helpful, but far from enough. Still, Noah celebrated the small victory as if they had won a prize. Emily wished she could see the world through his eyes. That evening, as darkness settled outside, an email arrived. Emily opened it immediately. Her heart raced as she scanned the message. Another job application. Another rejection. She closed the laptop and stared at the wall. For the first time since losing her position, exhaustion began replacing determination. Not because she wanted to quit, because she was running out of options. Across the city, Daniel Brooks sat alone in his private office. Most of the building had emptied hours earlier. The skyline glittered beyond the windows. Thousands of lights stretched into the distance. He opened the latest report from the investigator. The details were simple. Emily had sold personal belongings. Noah had contributed his favorite toy. Rent remained unpaid. Workshop registration deadline approaching. Daniel set the report down slowly. He remembered growing up in a small apartment decades earlier. Long before the company. Long before the wealth. Long before private jets and executive meetings. His mother had worked multiple jobs to keep food on the table. There had been difficult months. Months when every purchase required sacrifice. Those memories never completely disappear, no matter how successful a person becomes. Daniel picked up a photograph from his desk. It showed him standing beside his mother years ago. She was smiling. Proud. Determined. The same qualities he now recognized in Emily Parker. For several minutes, he remained silent. Then he reached for the phone. His assistant answered immediately. "I want everything prepared," Daniel said. "The scholarship fund. The employment offer. The housing assistance package." There was a brief pause. "Are you ready to move forward?" she asked. Daniel looked out toward the city once more. Almost. Back at the apartment, Emily tucked Noah into bed. He held the engineering workshop flyer in his hands. "Do you think I will ever build something important?" he asked. Emily brushed his hair gently. "I know you will." Noah smiled. "Then I better keep practicing." After he fell asleep, Emily remained seated beside the bed for a few extra moments. The apartment was quiet, the future uncertain. Yet she continued believing tomorrow might bring an opportunity she could not yet see. What she did not know was that while she sat there worrying about how to save her son's dream, a decision had already been made inside one of the most powerful offices in Chicago. And within days, a single unexpected envelope would arrive and begin changing everything. Monday morning arrived with a strange stillness. The rain had finally stopped. Pale sunlight slipped through the apartment blinds and painted thin lines across the kitchen floor. Emily Parker stood at the sink washing dishes when she heard the sound of a vehicle stopping outside. She glanced through the window, but saw nothing unusual. Delivery trucks often passed through the neighborhood. Life continued. At least that was what she told herself. After Noah left for school, she returned to her routine. Job applications, phone calls, emails. The same cycle repeated hour after hour. Around 11 o'clock, a knock echoed through the apartment. Emily frowned. She was not expecting anyone. When she opened the door, a uniformed courier stood holding a large cream-colored envelope. "Emily Parker?" he asked. "Yes." Signature required. Emily signed quickly and accepted the envelope. There was no return address, no company logo, nothing except her name written neatly across the front. She closed the door and stared at it for several seconds. Her first thought was another bill. Her second thought was something legal. Neither possibility felt encouraging. Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a single letter printed on expensive stationery. The message was brief. "Ms. Parker, you are invited to attend a private meeting on Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Transportation will be provided if necessary. Your presence is requested. Additional details enclosed." Emily read the letter twice, then a third time. Attached was an address located in downtown Chicago. The building name immediately caught her attention. Brooks Global Headquarters. She blinked. Surely there had been a mistake. She had never applied there. She knew the company, of course. Everyone did. It was one of the largest corporations in the country. Why would they want to meet with her? She searched for answers inside the envelope. There were none. Just a date, a time, an address. By afternoon, uncertainty had transformed into curiosity. She called the phone number listed at the bottom of the letter. A professional receptionist answered immediately. "Yes, Ms. Parker. We are expecting you on Wednesday. May I ask what this is regarding?" There was a brief pause. "I am afraid I cannot provide details. We look forward to meeting you." The line disconnected politely. Emily sat staring at her phone, confused, curious, slightly nervous. That evening, she showed the letter to Noah. His eyes widened instantly. "That building is huge. I know. Maybe they want to hire you." Emily laughed softly. Companies usually interview people before sending mysterious invitations. Noah examined the letter again. Then maybe it is something better. Children possess a remarkable ability to believe in possibilities. Adults often lose that gift. The following day passed painfully slowly. Every hour seemed longer than the one before it. Emily tried focusing on applications and household responsibilities, but her mind kept drifting back to the envelope. Meanwhile, several miles away, preparations were already underway. Inside Brooks' global headquarters, executive assistants coordinated schedules. Conference rooms were reserved. Documents were finalized. Security teams received instructions. Everything was being arranged with precision. Daniel Brooks reviewed the final plans personally. His assistant entered carrying a folder. "Everything is ready." Daniel nodded. "And Ms. Parker?" She confirmed attendance. A faint smile appeared on his face. "Good." The assistant hesitated. "Do you think she will recognize you?" Daniel looked out the window toward the city below. Not immediately. The next morning arrived bright and unusually clear. Chicago's skyline sparkled beneath crisp blue skies. Emily stood in front of her closet longer than necessary. She selected her best professional outfit, the same one she had worn to every important interview over the past 3 years. It was not expensive, but it was neat and carefully maintained. By 9 o'clock, she was driving downtown. Traffic crawled between towering buildings. Her stomach tightened with every passing mile. Questions filled her mind. Had someone recommended her? Was there really a job opportunity? Why had they contacted her specifically? When Brooks' global headquarters finally appeared ahead, Emily felt her breath catch. The building rose high above the surrounding streets, glass reflecting sunlight in every direction. Employees moved through the lobby carrying badges and briefcases. Success seemed to radiate from every corner. Emily parked nearby and sat quietly inside her car for a moment. She looked down at the invitation resting on the passenger seat. Then she whispered something she had repeated countless times during difficult moments. "Just keep moving forward." Gathering her courage, she stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. She had no idea that within the next hour, The mystery that had begun with a simple lunch on a cold afternoon was about to reveal itself in a way she never could have imagined. The lobby of Brooks' global headquarters felt more like the entrance to a luxury hotel than a corporate office. Sunlight poured through walls of glass. Marble floors reflected the movement of employees crossing the vast space. Emily Parker stepped through the revolving doors and immediately felt underdressed despite wearing the best outfit she owned. She tightened her grip on her purse and approached the reception desk. The receptionist greeted her by name before she could even introduce herself. "Good morning, Miss Parker. We have been expecting you." Emily blinked. "You have?" The woman smiled warmly. "Absolutely. Someone will escort you upstairs." Moments later, a professional assistant appeared and guided her toward a private elevator. As the doors closed, Emily watched the city shrink beneath her through the glass walls. Floor after floor passed in silence. Her heart beat faster with each number. Finally, the elevator stopped. The doors opened onto an executive level unlike anything she had ever seen. The hallway was quiet, elegant. Every detail seemed carefully designed. Framed photographs lined the walls. Awards filled glass displays. Through distant windows, the Chicago skyline stretched for miles. The assistant led her toward large double doors at the end of the corridor. "Right this way, Miss Parker." Emily nodded nervously. The doors opened. She stepped into a conference room larger than her entire apartment. A polished table occupied the center. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city below. Several executives sat quietly along one side of the room. Nobody spoke. Nobody checked a phone. It felt as though everyone was waiting for something. Or someone. Emily hesitated near the entrance. "Am I in the right place?" she asked softly. Before anyone could answer, another door opened across the room. Footsteps echoed against the hardwood floor. Emily turned. At first, she noticed only the tailored navy suit, then the confident posture, then the familiar eyes. Her breath caught instantly. For a moment, her mind refused to connect the pieces. The man walking toward her looked nothing like the person sitting on that cold park bench. Yet somehow he looked exactly the same. Daniel Brooks stopped a few feet away and smiled. "Hello, Emily." The room seemed to disappear around her. She stared at him in disbelief. "You?" The word barely escaped her lips. Daniel nodded gently. "Yes." Emily looked from him to the executives seated around the room. Then back again. "You are Daniel Brooks?" "I am." Silence filled the space. Every confusing moment from the past 2 weeks suddenly collided inside her mind. The invitation, the headquarters, the secrecy, the reports she never knew existed. Most of all, the memory of a cold afternoon and a simple lunch. Daniel motioned toward a chair. "Please sit down." Emily lowered herself into the seat carefully, still struggling to process what was happening. Daniel remained standing for a moment, looking out at the city below before turning back toward her. "The day we met," he began, "I was conducting a personal project." Emily listened without speaking. "For years, I have tried to understand something that money cannot measure. Character, compassion, kindness." His voice remained calm, steady. "So I spent time moving through the city without titles, without recognition, without the advantages people associate with success." Emily remembered the worn coat, the trembling hands, the tired eyes. Daniel continued. "Hundreds of people walked past me. Some never looked up. Others pretended not to see me. Then you stopped." Emily glanced down briefly. "It was only lunch." Daniel smiled. "That is what makes it important." The executives around the table remained silent, listening, watching. Daniel stepped closer. "You helped when there was nothing to gain. In fact, from what I later learned, helping me cost you something. Money you could not easily spare." Emily felt emotion rising inside her chest. "I just did what I hoped someone would do for me." Daniel nodded slowly. "Exactly." For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Daniel reached for a folder resting on the conference table. He placed it gently in front of her. "That is why I asked you to come here today." Emily stared at the folder without opening it. Her hands trembled slightly. She had arrived expecting answers. What she was receiving felt much larger than answers. It felt like the beginning of something she never saw coming. Emily looked down at the folder resting on the polished conference table. For several seconds, she could not bring herself to open it. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city beyond the glass walls. Daniel Brooks took his seat across from her and waited patiently. There was no pressure in his expression, no expectation, only quiet certainty. Finally, Emily opened the folder. The first page contained a formal employment offer. She blinked once, then twice. The salary alone was higher than anything she had earned before. Health, benefits, retirement contributions, professional development opportunities. She turned another page, then another. Her eyes widened with every document. I do not understand, she whispered. Daniel folded his hands. You are qualified for the position. Our team reviewed your background carefully. Emily looked up. You reviewed my background? Daniel nodded. The same way we evaluate every important investment. Thoroughly. A faint smile crossed his face. And I can assure you, you impressed more people than you realize. Emily continued reading. Then she reached the next section. Her breath caught. It was a scholarship agreement. Full funding for Noah's education program. Not only the engineering workshop he wanted to attend, but future academic opportunities as well. Books, materials, enrichment programs. The support extended far beyond a single event. Her eyes moved across the page as emotion built inside her chest. Noah, she whispered. Daniel nodded. Your son has extraordinary potential. Emily looked at him, stunned. You know about Noah? I know he dreams of becoming an engineer. I know he works hard. I know he was willing to sacrifice something important to help his family. Emily immediately thought of the remote control airplane. Daniel continued. Character often reveals itself early. She swallowed hard and looked back at the documents. Then she noticed another section. Housing assistance, temporary financial support, resources designed to help stabilize her situation while she rebuilt her career. The words blurred for a moment as tears filled her eyes. For weeks, she had carried every burden alone. Every bill, every fear, every sleepless night. Now she was staring at solutions she never imagined possible. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you do all of this? Daniel leaned back slightly. The executives around the room remained silent. Even they seemed interested in his answer. Daniel looked toward the skyline before speaking. Because years ago, my mother was where you are now. Emily listened carefully. She worked hard. She sacrificed constantly. Most people never noticed. One day a stranger helped her when he had no reason to. That act changed the direction of our lives. His voice softened. I never forgot it. Emily lowered her eyes. Daniel continued. Success creates opportunities. Wealth creates options. But neither matters if they are used only for yourself. He looked directly at her. The day we met, you reminded me of her. Silence filled the room again. This time it felt different. Warmer. More personal. Emily pressed her hand against the folder. The same woman who had worried about rent just days earlier was now sitting in one of the most powerful buildings in Chicago receiving life-changing news. Yet somehow, none of it felt unreal. It felt connected. One moment leading to another. One choice creating the next. Daniel reached into his jacket and removed a small photograph. He slid it across the table. Emily picked it up carefully. It showed a younger Daniel standing beside his mother. Both were smiling. She taught me something important, he said. Never judge people by what they have. Judge them by what they are willing to give when they have very little. Emily stared at the photograph, then at the folder, then back at Daniel. The memory of that cold afternoon returned vividly. A sandwich, a bowl of soup, a bottle of water. Such ordinary things. Yet somehow they had carried extraordinary consequences. Daniel smiled gently. You thought you were helping a stranger. In reality, you revealed who you are. That is much more valuable. Emily wiped away a tear and laughed softly through the emotion. For the first time in weeks, the future no longer felt like a wall standing in front of her. It felt like a door slowly opening. When Emily finally left Brooks' global headquarters that afternoon, the city looked different. The streets were the same. The buildings were the same. The traffic still flowed through downtown Chicago in long streams of steel and glass. Yet something inside her had changed. For weeks, she had carried uncertainty like a weight on her shoulders. Now, for the first time in a long time, she could breathe. She sat in her car for several minutes before starting the engine. The folder rested beside her on the passenger seat. Every page inside represented a future she had. Almost stopped believing was possible. As she drove home, sunlight reflected across the skyline and painted the windows gold. It felt as though the city itself had softened. When she opened the apartment door later that afternoon, Noah was waiting. The moment he saw her expression, he knew something important had happened. Mom, he asked. Emily set her purse down and smiled. Not the careful smile she used when trying to hide worry. A real smile. The kind that reached her eyes. Come sit with me. Noah joined her at the kitchen table. She placed the folder between them. At first, he listened quietly as she explained the job offer. Then his eyes widened. Then came the scholarship information. Then the educational support. By the time she finished, Noah looked completely speechless. Wait, he finally said. You mean I can go to the engineering workshop? Emily laughed through happy tears. Yes. Really, really. Noah jumped from his chair and wrapped his arms around her. For a long moment, neither said anything. They simply held on to each other. Sometimes joy arrives so suddenly that words cannot keep up. Over the following weeks, life slowly began changing. Emily started her new position at Brooks Global. She worked hard, just as she always had. The difference was that now her effort was recognized. Her ideas mattered. Her experience mattered. She no longer felt invisible. Noah attended the engineering workshop and returned home each day overflowing with excitement. He talked about designs, materials, structures, and possibilities. His dreams no longer felt distant. They felt real. One evening, several months later, Emily and Noah walked through the same downtown park where everything had started. The weather was warmer now. Families filled the sidewalks. Children played nearby. The bench was still there. The same bench where a tired stranger had once sat alone while thousands passed him by. Noah stopped and looked at it thoughtfully. Funny how one lunch changed everything. Emily smiled. Maybe. Noah frowned. Maybe. Emily sat down on the bench and looked across the park. I do not think it was the lunch. Noah sat beside her. Then what was it? Emily thought for a moment. It was the choice. Noah listened carefully. Most people think big moments change lives, she said. But usually it is small moments. Small decisions. Small acts of kindness. Those are the things that create the biggest changes. Noah nodded slowly. The lesson settled somewhere deep inside him. Across the city, Daniel Brooks stood in his office overlooking the skyline. A framed photograph rested on one corner of his desk. It showed him and his mother many years earlier. Beside it sat another picture taken recently at an educational event sponsored by the company. Emily and Noah stood smiling among a group of students. Daniel looked at both photographs and smiled quietly. Success had given him many accomplishments. Awards, buildings, companies, wealth. Yet none of those things felt as meaningful as seeing a deserving family receive an opportunity at exactly the moment they needed one. Because the truth was simple. Emily had never helped a stranger because she expected a reward. She helped because compassion was part of who she was. And sometimes life has a remarkable way of remembering those moments. A sandwich, a bowl of soup, a bottle of water. Small things, ordinary things. Yet behind every act of kindness lies a possibility we cannot see. The possibility that one day, somewhere, somehow, goodness will find its way back home.